A girl in a worn flannel shirt and mud-caked boots stood in the most advanced military command center in the region. The general looked at her, a thin smile crossing his face. "We have satellites, supercomputers, and an entire team of engineers," he said. She just shook her head. "I don't need a computer." The room erupted in laughter. A countdown clock on the screen glowed red, 60 seconds until base-wide system failure. No one knew that this farm girl was the only person who understood what was about to happen. And when the second hand hit 0, the entire base fell into absolute silence. The Mountain Ridge Tactical Operations Center wasn't supposed to exist on any map. Built into the granite heart of the Cascade Range, it coordinated defense systems across 3 states, 73 satellite feeds, real-time threat analysis powered by quantum processors, a command staff of 214 of the military's finest minds. General Marcus Hartwell had run the facility for 6 years without a single critical failure, until today. The main operations floor hummed with controlled efficiency. Rows of stations glowed blue in the dim light. Analysts murmured into headsets. Wall-sized displays showed weather patterns, air traffic, and threat assessments updating by the millisecond. Captain Derek Morrison approached the general's observation platform. "Sir, the civilian consultant is here." Hartwell didn't look up from his tactical display. "The what?" "The consultant. From the incident report 3 weeks ago." Morrison shifted his weight. Environmental Services flagged an anomaly in the ventilation sensors. Trail led back to someone who filed a complaint with the county. "And we brought them here? To a classified facility?" Director Reeves approved it, said it might be worth 5 minutes. Hartwell finally turned. "Please tell me it's not some tree hugger who thinks our exhaust fans are disturbing the elk." Morrison's silence was answer enough. The elevator doors opened. Sarah Brennan stepped onto the operations floor in canvas work pants and a faded denim jacket. Her boots left small dirt prints on the polished concrete. She carried no briefcase, no tablet, no credentials visible except a temporary clearance badge clipped to her collar. She was 26 years old and looked distinctly out of place. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Hartwell descended from his platform, hand extended in a gesture more dismissive than welcoming. "Miss Brennan, thank you for coming all this way. I'm sure we can clear up whatever concerns you have very quickly." Sarah shook his hand with a grip that surprised him, firm, calloused. "I appreciate you seeing me, General. Your family runs a farm, I understand. Greenhouse operation, hydroponics, climate control, some vertical farming, about 40 acres near Millbrook Valley." "Fascinating." Hartwell's tone suggested otherwise. "Now, about these ventilation readings. They're not random," Sarah said. Morrison pulled up a data screen. "Ma'am, our environmental engineers have reviewed the patterns. There's no correlation to any external factors. It's equipment variance, well within tolerance." Sarah looked at the screen, then at the air handlers visible through the glass panels of the west wall. "How long have the fluctuations been happening?" 6 weeks. "Started small? Barely measurable. Getting worse every few days?" Morrison blinked. "How did you—" "And the pattern changes based on time of day." The room went very quiet. Hartwell crossed his arms. "Young lady, we have 3 Ph.D. engineers on staff and diagnostic systems that cost more than most people's houses. If there were a pattern, we'd have found it." Sarah didn't react to the condescension. She walked slowly along the main floor, looking not at the screens but at the physical infrastructure. The cable runs along the ceiling, the arrangement of the cooling vents, the slight tremor in the floor that no one else seemed to notice. "You've increased processing load recently," she said. "New systems came online." "That's classified," Morrison said quickly. "But you did." Hartwell's jaw tightened. "Miss Brennan, I appreciate your intuition, but this is a military installation running on technology you couldn't possibly understand. We'll take your observations under advisement. Captain Morrison will escort you." A warning tone pulsed through the room. Every head snapped to the main display. Sarah stopped walking. She was staring at something the rest of them hadn't noticed yet. The warning tone was subtle, 2 soft chimes that most of the staff ignored. But senior analyst Patricia Chen's face went pale as she pulled up the source code on her terminal. "Sir, we have a synchronization error in the primary satellite array." Hartwell moved to her station. "Define error." "Telemetry feed from Bird 7 is delayed by 0.003 seconds. "That's nothing." "Yes, sir. Except." Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Birds 3 and 11 are showing the same lag now." Morrison joined them. "Environmental?" No atmospheric interference. No solar activity. The satellites are fine. Chen pulled up diagnostic after diagnostic. It's our receiving equipment, but the hardware checks out perfect. Across the room, Lieutenant James Kowalski called out from his station. Ground radar showing intermittent tracking loss. Western sector. Duration? Hartwell demanded. Milliseconds. But it's happened 4 times in the last 2 minutes. Sarah remained where she'd stopped, perfectly still, head tilted slightly. She was listening. The command center's ambient sound was a constant low hum cooling systems, computers, the whisper of filtered air through vents. Most people stopped hearing it after an hour. It became background, invisible, but Sarah had spent her entire life listening to systems. Greenhouses were complex ecosystems. Temperature, humidity, airflow, nutrient circulation, each element created its own sound. She'd learned young that you could hear a pump failing 3 days before it gave out, that a particular whistle in the ventilation meant the filters needed changing, that healthy growth had a rhythm sick plants lacked. This room had a rhythm too, and it was wrong. Chen's warning became more urgent. Sir, now we're getting data conflicts. Bird 7 is reporting the same aircraft in 2 positions simultaneously. That's impossible, Morrison said. I know, but it's happening. Hartwell activated his comm. Engineering. What's the status on the quantum processor array? The voice that came back was stressed. We're seeing minor timing deviations, sir. Nothing that should affect operations. Define minor. Nanosecond range. It's like the system is hiccuping. Sarah moved then, walking toward the engineering section. Not quickly, just with purpose. She stopped at a junction box mounted near the floor, knelt down, put her hand flat against the metal casing. Morrison noticed. Ma'am, please don't touch. When did you upgrade the cooling system? Sarah asked. That's not relevant. When? Chen checked her records. 6 weeks ago. We installed a new liquid cooling array for the processor expansion. Sarah nodded slowly. And the ventilation anomalies started the same day. Coincidence, Hartwell said flatly. But his chief engineer, Dr. Raymond Foster, had joined the group. He was a man in his 50s, brilliant and methodical. He looked at Sarah with more curiosity than dismissal. What do you think you're seeing? He asked. Sarah stood, not seeing, feeling. Your new cooling system changed the temperature gradient in the facility. That changed how air moves through the ducts. That created pressure variations that affect your sensors in ways your diagnostic programs don't recognize because they're too small and too specific. Foster frowned. Our sensors are shielded from electromagnetic interference, not from physical pressure changes. The variations would be minuscule. At first, Sarah said, but systems like this, they amplify. Each sensor reading affects the next calculation. Each calculation feeds into the next system. Small errors compound. The room was watching now. Hartwell stepped between them. Dr. Foster, your assessment? Foster hesitated. It's theoretically possible, but our error correction protocols should catch any compounding. Every screen in the command center flashed red simultaneously. The warning klaxon that sounded wasn't subtle anymore. It was deafening. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the operations floor in harsh white light. Chen's voice cut through the alarm. Cascading system failure. Multiple arrays reporting critical errors. Hartwell's command training took over. Talk to me. What are we looking at? The processor timing errors are exponential now. They're spreading through every connected system. Chen's hands moved frantically across her controls. Satellites, radar, communications, everything starting to desynchronize. Morrison pulled up a system architecture diagram. How is that possible? Each system has independent error checking. Foster was already at his engineering console, because they're all using the same quantum clock as a reference. If the clock itself is being affected, then every system is measuring time slightly differently, Sarah finished quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood apart from the frantic activity, arms crossed, watching the screens with an expression that wasn't panic but something closer to recognition. You've seen this before, Foster said. It wasn't a question. Different scale. We had a greenhouse where the irrigation timing went wrong. Pumps were fine. Programming was fine. But the environmental sensors were giving readings that were fractionally off temperature, humidity, soil moisture. Each system was correcting based on bad data, making things worse. What fixed it? Foster asked. We shut it all down, let everything settle to baseline, then brought systems back one at a time, manually. Morrison shook his head. Ma'am, with respect, this isn't a greenhouse. We can't just shut down national defense systems because of a hunch. It's not a hunch, Sarah said, her voice still calm. You have all the data. You're just not reading it right. Hartwell's patience snapped. Young lady, I have 178 Ph.D. level engineers in this facility. I have diagnostic systems designed by the finest minds in technology. And you're suggesting they're all wrong because, what? You have a feeling? Sarah met his gaze without flinching. I'm suggesting that sometimes smart people build systems so complex they can't see simple problems. This is not a simple problem. Yes, it is. Sarah pointed at the main display. Your cooling system changed the thermal dynamics. That affected air pressure. Air pressure affected sensors. Sensors gave bad readings. Your error correction tried to compensate, but it compensated based on the assumption that the errors were random when they're actually systematic. That's speculation, Morrison insisted. No, Foster said slowly. That's actually a valid hypothesis. Hartwell rounded on him. You're entertaining this? Sir, look at the error distribution. Foster highlighted sections of code on his screen. She's right that it's not random. There's a pattern. We've been treating it like noise when we should be treating it like signal. Chen's voice rose in pitch. Sirs, we have incoming crisis alert. The system just flagged a priority threat that doesn't exist. It's analyzing false data. Can you override? Hartwell demanded. I'm trying, but the system won't accept manual input. It thinks I'm the error. Sarah stepped forward. It's protecting itself. You designed it to ignore human mistakes during high-stress situations. How the hell do you know our protocols? I don't. But that's what I'd do if I built a system that smart. Sarah moved to Chen's station. May I? Chen looked at Hartwell. He gave a curt nod. Sarah studied the screen, not the data, but the structure of how it was displayed. The refresh rate. The way certain numbers updated faster than others. You're fighting it, she said. Fighting what? The system. It's trying to stabilize itself, but every time you input a correction, it interprets that as another error and adjusts further away from baseline. Morrison's expression was skeptical. So your solution is to do nothing? No, my solution is to stop doing the wrong thing. Hartwell's voice dropped to dangerous quiet. And you think you know the right thing. I know that you don't, Sarah said simply. The room went silent except for the alarms. Then Kowalski shouted from his station. Sir, system just initiated a full base lockdown sequence. We have 60 seconds before automatic protocols engage. The main display changed. Every screen showed the same thing, a timer counting down from 60 seconds. Below it, in clinical text, automated defense protocol engaged. All systems entering secure mode. What the hell is secure mode? Morrison demanded. Foster's face went gray. It's a fail-safe. If the system determines there's been a critical compromise, it locks everything down and wipes all temporary data to prevent infiltration. Can we stop it? Not from here. It requires command authorization from 3 separate terminals simultaneously. Hartwell was already moving. Then get me those terminals online. Sir, that's the problem. Foster pointed at his screen. The system has designated all current operator inputs as compromised. It won't accept any commands until after the reset. Override it. I can't. That's the point of the protocol. It can't be overridden. The countdown hit 48 seconds. Chen's station flashed with new alerts. It's not just data we're going to lose. When secure mode engages, it cuts primary power to non-essential systems to force a cold restart. Define non-essential, Hartwell said, though his tone suggested he already knew. Life support, communications, door locks, everything that's not critical defense infrastructure. Morrison's voice was tight. How long until those systems come back online? Minimum 4 hours, maybe 8. We have personnel throughout the facility. I know. Sarah spoke into the chaos. You have to stop the reset. Thank you for that brilliant insight, Hartwell snapped. No, I mean you have to stop trying to stop it. Every eye in the room turned to her. The countdown hit 35 seconds. Foster moved toward her. Explain. Quickly. Your system thinks it's under attack because you keep giving it inputs it doesn't recognize as valid. Every correction you try looks like an attack vector. You're confirming its suspicion. So we just let it lock us down? No. You stop fighting and start working with it. That's word salad, Morrison shouted, but Foster was nodding slowly. She means we need to give it inputs it will recognize as legitimate. Stop trying to override the protocol and instead satisfy its security requirements. How? Chen asked. We can't authenticate the system, won't accept our credentials. Sarah moved to the center of the room, looking at the array of screens. What does the system need to stand down? Verification that there's no actual threat, Foster said. But we can't provide that because you're using the sensors. Sarah interrupted. The same sensors giving bad data. 27 seconds. Can you isolate systems? Sarah asked. What? Can you separate the security protocol from the environmental sensors? Foster's fingers flew across his keyboard. Maybe, if I reroute through the backup, but I'd need to know which sensors are causing the cascading errors. All of them, Sarah said. That's impossible. We'd have to disable the entire monitoring network, then disable it. Hartwell stepped between them. Absolutely not. We'd be flying blind. Sarah looked at him directly. You're already blind. Your instruments are lying to you. Right now, you're about to lock down a military facility and trap everyone inside because a computer is confused. Which is more dangerous, being blind for a few minutes or being locked in for 8 hours? 19 seconds. The general's jaw worked. Command decisions were supposed to be made with data, with analysis, with certainty, not with trust in a farm girl who'd walked in 20 minutes ago. Chen's voice cracked. Sir, we need to decide, now. Sarah spoke quietly, cutting through the tension. General, you brought me here because something was wrong. You knew your systems weren't telling you the truth. Trust that instinct. 15 seconds. Hartwell closed his eyes. Opened them. Dr. Foster, do what she says. Foster's hands hesitated over his keyboard. Sir, just to be clear, you want me to disable every environmental sensor in the facility? Do it. That includes temperature monitors, pressure sensors, airflow meters. I understand what it includes, Doctor. 12 seconds. Foster initiated the shutdown sequence, but his screen flashed red. Access denied. The system is blocking me. Why? Morrison demanded. Because disabling the sensors looks like exactly what an attacker would do before sabotaging the facility. Sarah pushed forward. Where's the physical junction? What? The sensors run through a physical network. Where's the main junction box? Foster pointed to a door marked Maintenance Access. Sublevel 2, East Corridor. But you can't just unplug. Sarah was already moving. Morrison blocked her path. You don't have authorization for that area. Then come with me. 8 seconds. Hartwell made the decision. Morrison, go with her. Foster, guide them on comm. They ran. The maintenance corridor was narrow, lined with pipes and cable conduits. Sarah's boots rang on the metal grating. Morrison was on her heels, speaking into his radio. Foster, where exactly? 50 feet ahead, panel marked EC7. You'll need a security code. What is it? 794 Delta 3. 5 seconds. Morrison punched in the code. The panel swung open, revealing a massive junction box with dozens of connections. Sarah studied it for approximately 2 seconds. Which ones are environmental? She demanded. Morrison looked panicked. I don't know. Foster, blue terminals. Foster's voice crackled through the radio. But you can't just disconnect them. The system will interpret. I know what it'll interpret, Sarah said. 3 seconds. Her hand went to the blue terminal cluster. General, you need to give me authorization. Hartwell's voice came through Morrison's radio, commanding and clear. Authorization granted. Do it. Sarah pulled every blue connection simultaneously. 2 seconds. The corridor lights flickered. The countdown alarm changed pitch. 1 second. Then, silence. Morrison's radio crackled with Chen's voice. Sir. The countdown stopped. At what? 0. But the reset didn't engage. Why not? Foster's voice joined the channel, wonder in his tone. Because the system just received what it interpreted as a clean sensor baseline. All environmental data went to neutral simultaneously. It looked like everything suddenly stabilized. Did it work? Hartwell asked. We're still operational. Life support is active. Computers are running. A pause. But we have no environmental monitoring. We're completely blind to temperature, pressure, airflow. Can you see defense systems? Yes, sir. Satellites, radar, communications all coming back online. And they're stable. The timing errors are correcting. Morrison looked at Sarah in the dim emergency lighting of the corridor. She was breathing hard, her hand still on the empty junction box. How did you know that would work? He asked. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She was looking at the cables, tracing their routes with her eyes. I didn't, she finally said. Not for certain. Then why? Because the system wasn't broken. It was overwhelmed. Sarah turned to face him. You built something so smart it couldn't tell the difference between bad data and bad reality. So I gave it the one thing computers can't argue with. What's that? Nothing. A blank slate. No data is better than bad data. Morrison's radio crackled. Captain, bring her back to the command center. Now. They walked back in silence. When they emerged onto the operations floor, every person in the room was staring at the screens. The facility systems were stabilizing. One by one, errors were clearing. And Sarah Brennan, the farm girl in muddy boots, stood in the center of it all. Hartwell approached slowly. Miss Brennan, you just saved this facility. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe your systems would have figured it out. I don't think so. Sarah finally showed emotion a slight smile. I don't need a computer, General, but I understand them. That's different. The command center remained in the eerie calm that follows averted disaster. But Foster's expression suggested the disaster wasn't entirely averted. Sir, we have a problem. Hartwell turned sharply. Another one? We stopped the reset, but we didn't fix the underlying issue. Foster displayed a complex diagram showing system architecture. The quantum processor timing is still desynchronized. We corrected the symptoms by removing the bad sensor data, but the disease is still there. Explain in terms I can understand, Doctor. The processor array is like a heart that's beating irregularly. We stopped it from affecting the rest of the body, but the heart itself is still sick. If we bring the environmental sensors back online without fixing the core timing issue, we'll be right back where we started. Chen added, and we need those sensors. We can't operate long-term without knowing internal temperature, pressure, air quality. How long do we have? Hartwell interrupted. Foster checked his displays. In current mode, 6, maybe 8 hours before we start having real problems. After that, we'll need to either fix the processor timing or evacuate the facility. Morrison whistled low. Evacuate? This base holds classified systems for 3 states. I'm aware. Hartwell's gaze moved to Sarah, who had been silently observing the conversation. You have thoughts. It wasn't a question. The cooling system, Sarah said. You need to change it back. Back to what? Whatever configuration you had before the upgrade 6 weeks ago. Foster shook his head. That's not possible. The old system couldn't handle the thermal load from the new processor array. We'd overheat within an hour. Then you need to change how the new system operates. It's running at optimal efficiency. For temperature, Sarah agreed, but not for pressure dynamics. Foster leaned forward, interested despite himself. Keep talking. Sarah moved to his terminal, then hesitated. May I? Please. She pulled up the cooling system schematic not because she could read the technical details, but because she could see the physical layout, the pipes, the flow directions, the placement of pumps and heat exchangers. You optimized for maximum cooling with minimum energy use, she said, tracing routes with her finger. That meant running coolant at very specific temperatures and pressures. But those specific conditions created turbulence in the airflow around the equipment. Turbulence that affected the sensors, Foster breathed. And the sensors affected the calculations. And the calculations affected the quantum timing because the processors were constantly correcting for environmental variations that weren't really there. Morrison was skeptical. So your solution is to make the cooling system less efficient? No. My solution is to make it less precise. Sarah looked at Foster. What if you ran the coolant at a slightly higher temperature but with more consistent pressure? You'd use a bit more energy, but you'd eliminate the turbulence. Foster was already running calculations. It would work thermally. We'd stay within operating parameters, but I'd need to reprogram the cooling control system, recalibrate the flow rates. How long? Hartwell asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. We don't have 4 hours. Then we do it in 2, Foster said, his voice taking on the determination of someone who'd just seen an impossible problem become merely difficult. Hartwell made his decision with the same certainty he'd shown earlier. Do it. Captain Morrison, you're in charge of coordinating the manual environmental monitoring until we have sensors back. Chen, work with Foster on the system modifications. Everyone else, we're going to manual operations protocols until further notice. The room burst into controlled activity. Sarah started to step back, her role apparently complete. Not you, Hartwell said. You stay right here. If we're rebuilding this system based on your theory, I need you where I can ask questions. I'm not an engineer, General. No. You're something we apparently needed more than engineers. He gestured to a chair near his command platform. Sit. That's an order even if you're technically a civilian. Sarah sat. and watched as a military base began rebuilding itself around a farm girl's understanding of how air moves through ducts. The next 90 minutes tested everyone's nerves. Foster worked with his engineering team in a contained fury of activity. Lines of code scrolled across screens. Cooling system schematics were marked up, recalculated, marked up again. Morrison coordinated teams throughout the facility, manually checking temperatures, pressure readings, air quality. It was work that computers had done invisibly for years. Now humans with handheld meters walked the corridors, calling out numbers that Chen logged on a massive whiteboard. Sarah remained at her assigned station, answering Foster's increasingly technical questions with answers that weren't technical at all. If I increase flow rate by 8%, will that destabilize the pressure gradient? Where? Cooling loop 3, near the primary processor housing. Sarah closed her eyes, visualizing. That loop runs past the east ventilation shaft? Yes. Then no. The increased flow will be buffered by the air volume in the shaft. But loops 1 and 2 will be affected. How do you know that? Because water always takes the path of least resistance. If you push harder through 3, you reduce pressure in the other loops. It's like pinching a hose. The water doesn't disappear. It just redistributes. Foster stared at her. That's actually correct. But you described fluid dynamics using a garden hose analogy. Is there a difference? No, he admitted. I suppose there isn't. At the 90-minute mark, Foster stood up from his console. General, modifications are complete. We're ready to implement. Walk me through it, Hartwell ordered. We've increased coolant temperature by 4 degrees but optimized flow consistency. The system will use approximately 12% more power, but thermal load will be well within parameters. More importantly, the pressure variations that were affecting sensors should be eliminated. Should be? The calculations are solid, but we won't know for certain until we activate it and bring the sensors back online. Chen pulled up the implementation sequence. Sir, this is a live swap. We'll need to transition from current cooling to new configuration while maintaining thermal stability. If we get the timing wrong, what happens? Morrison asked. Best case, we trigger thermal warnings and have to shut down. Worst case, we damage the quantum processors. Hartwell looked at Sarah. Miss Brennan? She'd been quiet during the technical discussion, but her attention hadn't wavered. The timing has to be exact. You can't just flip a switch. We know, Foster said. That's why we have a sequenced activation protocol. No, I mean you can't rely on the protocol. Sarah stood, moving to the cooling system display. Your protocol assumes everything happens in the order you programmed, but physical systems have lag, thermal inertia. The coolant temperature won't change instantly when you adjust it. The flow won't stabilize instantly when you change pressure. Foster's face fell. She's right. Our sequence assumes ideal response times, but in reality, you need to feel it, Sarah finished. You need to watch how the system responds and adjust in real time. But we don't have sensors. You have people. Sarah pointed at Morrison's whiteboard full of manual readings. Your teams have been monitoring temperatures across the facility. They know where the hot spots are, where the cool zones are. Use them. Hartwell immediately grasped the implication. You want to do this manually, not manually, but not purely automated either. A hybrid approach let the computer handle the mechanics, but have humans verify each step before the next one executes. Morrison was already on the radio. All monitoring teams, prepare for active duty. You're going to be our sensors during a critical operation. Foster pulled up the activation sequence and began modifying it. If we break this into 60-second intervals with manual verification at each step, how many intervals? Hartwell asked. 12. 12 minutes where we're operating a multi-billion-dollar facility on human eyeballs and thermometers. Yes, sir. The general looked around his command center at the staff who'd spent careers trusting computers, now preparing to trust each other. Then we'd better be good at it. He activated facility-wide communication. All personnel, this is General Hartwell. For the next 12 minutes, we're going back to basics. No computer tells you you're wrong. No override tells you you're mistaken. You report what you see. We trust what you report. Clear? A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the speakers. Hartwell turned to Foster. Initiate sequence. Initiating. Mark. The countdown began again. But this time, they were controlling it. The first interval went smoothly. Foster adjusted coolant temperature. Teams throughout the facility reported stable readings. The command center's ambient temperature held steady. Interval 1 complete, Chen announced. All zones green. Proceeding to interval 2, Foster said. He increased flow pressure incrementally. This time, Lieutenant Kowalski's voice came through with concern. Command, monitoring Station 7. We're showing temperature rise in the North Corridor, 2 degrees in 30 seconds. Foster's hands froze over his controls. That shouldn't be happening, the math says. The North Corridor has lower ceiling clearance, Sarah said quietly. Heat pools differently there. You need to compensate with increased flow to that zone. We'll lose pressure elsewhere, only temporarily. The system will equalize. Foster made the adjustment. 15 seconds later, temperature stabilizing. We're coming back down. Interval 2 complete. The pattern continued. Each 60-second interval brought new challenges that the calculations hadn't predicted, but that Sarah seemed to anticipate. In interval 5, the east ventilation shaft created an unexpected pressure wave. Sarah had teams open maintenance access panels to provide relief venting. In interval 7, coolant flow to the secondary processor housing created a feedback loop. Sarah suggested routing flow through an alternate pipe that wasn't even shown on the primary schematic. How do you know that pipe exists? Morrison asked. All buildings have redundant systems. It has to be there. It was. By interval 9, Foster had stopped questioning her suggestions. He simply implemented them. But interval 10 brought a crisis. Sir, Chen said, alarm clear in her voice. Quantum processor temperature is spiking, 7 degrees in 20 seconds. That's impossible, Foster said. We're below thermal load threshold. The main display showed the temperature curve accelerating upward. Abort? Morrison suggested. We can't. We're committed to the sequence. If we stop now, thermal shock could damage the processors worse than overheating. Hartwell looked at Sarah. She was staring at the temperature display, but her expression wasn't panic. It was concentration. It's not overheating, she said. The numbers are wrong. You just reconnected the first environmental sensor 30 seconds ago. It's still calibrating. That's not the actual temperature. How can you be sure? Because if the processor were really that hot, you'd hear it. The room went dead silent, everyone listening. The quantum processor housing made no unusual sound. No warning clicks. No thermal stress groans. Foster checked manual readings from nearby teams. Manual thermometers show normal range. The sensor is giving false data because it's calibrating based on the new cooling system parameters, Sarah finished. Give it 30 more seconds. 30 seconds felt like 30 years. Then the sensor reading dropped sharply, settling into normal range. Intervalton complete. 11 passed without incident, and then they were at interval 12. The final step, reconnecting all environmental sensors simultaneously and letting the modified cooling system take full control. This is it, Foster said. If the core timing issue isn't resolved, we'll see cascading errors within seconds. And if it is resolved? Hartwell asked. Then we'll know Sarah Brennan just saved a military base using principles my grandmother would understand. Foster executed the final sequence. Every screen in the command center filled with data as sensors came back online. Temperature readings, pressure gradients, airflow rates, all updating in real time. The room held its breath. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Chen's voice was barely above a whisper. All systems nominal. No timing errors, no data conflicts, no cascading failures. 30 seconds. Morrison checked satellite feeds. Bird 7 telemetry is perfect, no synchronization lag. 45 seconds. Kowalski verified radar systems. Ground tracking is stable, no anomalies. 60 seconds. Foster leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. It worked. It actually worked. The command center erupted in relieved conversation, handshakes, a few nervous laughs. But Sarah noticed something no one else did. The base had gone quiet, not silent. It still hummed with technology, still breathed with ventilation. But the particular rhythm that had been wrong was now right. The building sounded healthy. Hartwell let his staff celebrate for exactly 3 minutes before restoring order. Dr. Foster, I want a full diagnostic run. Confirm that everything we think just happened actually happened. Yes, sir. Captain Morrison, coordinate with all monitoring teams. I want independent verification of system stability from every section of this facility. On it, sir. Chen, prepare a classified incident report for tactical command, time-stamped with full detail. Understood. Then Hartwell turned to Sarah, who had remained quietly in her corner, watching the activity with an expression of satisfaction rather than triumph. Miss Brennan, my office. Now, the general's office was a stark contrast to the technology-filled command center wood desk, leather chairs, framed commendations on the walls. A place where decisions were made by humans, not computers. Hartwell gestured to a chair. Sarah sat. For a long moment, he simply studied her. "I've commanded this facility for 6 years," he finally said. "I've seen every kind of crisis simulation, every type of threat assessment. I've worked with experts in fields I can't even pronounce. And in 20 years of military service, I've never seen anything like what just happened." "You mean the system failure?" "I mean you." Hartwell leaned forward. "Who are you, Miss Brennan?" "I told you. I run a greenhouse operation. That's what you do, not who you are." He pulled a file from his desk, her background check from the clearance process. 26 years old. Bachelor's degree in agricultural science from a state university. Nothing special. Family farm, 3rd generation. No military service. No technology sector experience. No security clearance until 3 hours ago. "Is there a question? How does a farm girl save a military base?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Do you want the technical answer or the real answer?" "Both." "Technical answer. I grew up in systems that are more complex than anything in this building. A greenhouse ecosystem has thousands of variables: temperature, humidity, light spectrum, nutrient concentration, pH levels, CO2, saturation, pest populations, growth rates. Every variable affects every other variable. Change one thing, and you change everything. You learn to see patterns. You learn to understand how complex systems behave." Hartwell nodded slowly. "And the real answer? I learned young that the fanciest equipment doesn't matter if you don't understand what it's measuring." Sarah's expression grew distant, remembering. "My grandfather built our first greenhouse in 1987. No computers, no automation, just glass, plants, and careful attention. He could walk into that building and tell you within 1 degree what the temperature was, just by how the air felt. He knew when plants needed water by the color of their leaves, not by moisture meters. Intuition. No, knowledge. Deep knowledge earned over decades of observation. When my father added computers and automation, Grandpa was skeptical, but he taught us something important. Use the technology, but don't let it replace understanding." "So you learned both." "I learned that technology extends human capability, but doesn't replace human judgment." Sarah met his gaze directly. "Your engineers built an incredible system, General, but they built it so well that they stopped questioning it. They trusted the data more than their own senses. And you didn't. I couldn't. I don't have enough education to trust complex systems I don't understand. So, I fell back on what I do understand, that all systems, no matter how sophisticated, follow basic physical principles. Air moves, heat transfers, pressure equalizes. Those rules don't change just because you add computers." Hartwell was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, he said, "you filed a complaint with the county environmental office about unusual readings near our exhaust vents. I was worried about my crops. Your ventilation patterns changed. I thought it might affect my climate control. You were investigating us." "I was protecting my greenhouse." Sarah shrugged. "I had no idea this facility even existed. The county connected the dots, not me. But you understood immediately what was happening when you got here." "Not immediately. But the signs were there. Wrong rhythm, wrong pressure, wrong thermal signature. Like I said, patterns." Hartwell stood, walked to his window overlooking the operations floor below. "Miss Brennan, I'm going to be very frank with you. What happened today should not have been possible. A civilian should not have been able to diagnose, much less fix, a crisis that defeated 200 military personnel. There are going to be questions, investigations, people who will wonder if you somehow caused this problem so you could solve it." Sarah's voice remained calm. "Is that what you think?" "No." He turned back to face her. "I think we got lucky. We built systems so complex we couldn't see our own mistakes. And someone with the right perspective walked in at exactly the right moment." He returned to his desk. "But I can't let you just walk away. Are you detaining me? I'm offering you a job." Sarah blinked. "Excuse me?" "A consulting position. Official contract. Classified clearance. You'd work with Dr. Foster's team on system design review." "General, I'm not qualified. You just saved this facility using principles my engineers couldn't see. I'd say you're overqualified." Hartwell pulled out a contract from his desk drawer. "The Pentagon has spent billions making systems smarter. Maybe it's time we spent some money making sure we understand what that intelligence actually means." Sarah took the contract but didn't open it. "I'm not a soldier, General. I'm not even really a scientist. I grow plants, which is exactly why I need you." Hartwell sat down. "Military culture rewards specialization. We train people to be experts in narrower and narrower fields. That's valuable. But sometimes you need someone who understands the big picture, someone who can see how everything connects, because they've spent their life watching everything connect. You have plenty of systems engineers. Who think like systems engineers? He gestured toward the operations floor. Dr. Foster is brilliant. His team is brilliant. But they all learn the same methods, use the same approaches, see the world through the same lens. Today taught me that's dangerous. We need different perspectives. Sarah was quiet, turning the contract over in her hands. What happened today can't happen again, Hartwell continued. But it will happen again, somewhere, unless we change how we approach complex systems. You could help us do that. By growing plants? By teaching people who've forgotten how to trust their senses alongside their sensors. By reminding us that intelligence isn't just processing power, it's wisdom, observation, and the humility to know what you don't know. Sarah finally opened the contract, scanned the terms. The salary made her eyebrows rise. This is more than my entire farm operation makes in a year. You'd be worth twice that if I could justify it. Hartwell leaned back in his chair. Think about it. Talk to your family. The offer stays open for 2 weeks. She set the contract on his desk. I don't need 2 weeks. My grandfather had a saying, when you find good soil, plant your seeds there. Sarah stood. This isn't my soil, General. I respect what you do here. I'm glad I could help. But my place is with my greenhouses, my family, my work that I understand. Hartwell's disappointment was evident, but not surprised. I had to try. I know. Sarah extended her hand. Thank you for trusting me when you had no reason to. They shook hands, the general who commanded technology, and the farmer who commanded understanding. Miss Brennan, he said as she reached the door. One last question. When you first walked in here and saw our systems, did you know immediately what was wrong? Sarah smiled. No, but I knew something was wrong because of what I didn't see. What didn't you see? Anyone looking at anything except their screens. She gestured toward the operations floor. You have windows overlooking the equipment, glass walls so you can see the physical infrastructure. But no one was looking at it. Everyone was watching data. That told me the problem wasn't what the computers were showing you, it was what they were keeping you from seeing. Hartwell absorbed this. So the fix wasn't technical. The fix was remembering to look up. She left him there, standing in his office overlooking a command center that was running smoothly again. On the operations floor, Foster intercepted her. You're leaving? I am. But he struggled for words. You understand systems better than people with PhDs. You could... I understand one kind of system, Dr. Foster. You understand another. What happened today was both kinds of knowledge working together. Sarah pulled a business card from her pocket, handmade, with her farm's name and phone number. If you ever want to talk about how greenhouses work, call me. Maybe we can learn from each other. Foster took the card, looking at it like it was classified intel. Greenhouses. Complex systems that have to be sustainable, efficient, and resilient, just like what you build here. Different tools, same principles. She walked toward the elevator. Morrison caught up with her at the doors. Miss Brennan, I owe you an apology. For what? For doubting you. For thinking. He trailed off, embarrassed. For thinking I couldn't possibly know anything useful? Sarah's tone was gentle. Captain, you were doing your job. You're supposed to be skeptical of civilians in secure facilities. That's good judgment. Still, you know what impressed me about you? She pressed the elevator button. When the general ordered you to take me to those junction boxes, you didn't hesitate. You trusted his judgment, even though you disagreed. That's discipline. It's valuable. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. Miss Brennan, Morrison said quickly, what you said earlier about smart people building systems so complex they can't see simple problems, is that really what happened? The doors started to close. Sarah's final words drifted back. No, Captain. What happened is smart people forgot that complexity isn't the same as wisdom, and sometimes the simplest question is the hardest to answer. Does this make sense? The doors closed. 3 months later, Dr. Raymond Foster drove 90 minutes to visit a greenhouse operation in Millbrook Valley. Sarah met him at the entrance, wearing the same canvas, work pants, and denim jacket she'd worn at the base. Dr. Foster, this is a surprise. Call me Raymond. He looked around at the rows of glass structures, the vertical growing towers, the intricate irrigation systems. I wanted to see where you learned what you know. Come on. She led him through the main greenhouse, 40,000 square feet of precisely controlled environment. Tomatoes, peppers, leafy greens, herbs, all growing in perfect rows. We provide produce to 18 restaurants and 4 grocery chains, Sarah explained. Year-round production, no pesticides, 90% less water than field agriculture. Foster was mesmerized. The climate control, 5 zones, each maintained at different temperature and humidity. Automated, but we manually check everything twice daily. Why? If it's automated? Because automation can fail. Or more commonly, it can be right on average but wrong for specific plants. She stopped at a section of basil. This variety is supposed to thrive at 72 degrees. But these particular plants, from these particular seeds, do better at 74. No computer would know that, but I do, because I watch them. Foster pulled out a small device. Speaking of watching, I brought you something. It was a sensor suite, compact and sophisticated. This monitors temperature, humidity, CO2, even plant growth rate using laser measurement. I designed it after what happened at the base. It's not meant to replace observation, it's meant to augment it. Sarah examined it carefully. This is beautiful work. I thought, maybe it could help here, and maybe it could help me understand what you understand. She smiled. You want to learn about greenhouses? I want to learn about systems I can't fully control. That's what we're struggling with in military technology. We keep building things so complex we can't predict their behavior. Your systems are complex too, but you manage them differently. Because I learned early that I can't control nature. I can only work with it. Sarah gestured around the greenhouse. Everything here is alive, growing, changing. My job isn't to dominate that process, it's to create conditions where life thrives on its own. Foster nodded slowly. That's the opposite of military thinking. Maybe. Or maybe it's just a different perspective on the same goal, making systems that work reliably even when conditions change. They spent the next 3 hours walking through the greenhouse operation. Foster asked hundreds of questions. Sarah answered them all, often demonstrating physical principles that his sensors could measure but that he'd never thought to look for. As the sun set, they stood outside the main greenhouse, looking at the operation lit from within. I have a proposal, Foster said. Not a job offer, I learned that won't work, but a collaboration. I want to bring my engineering team here, quarterly. Let them see how you manage complexity. Maybe it'll teach us something about how to build better systems. Sarah considered. Will they listen? After what happened? Yes. You proved something no amount of academic papers could prove, that sometimes the best solution comes from seeing problems differently. Then yes. But on one condition. What's that? Your engineers have to actually work here, not just observe, get their hands dirty, plant things, watch things grow, understand the difference between data about life and life itself. Foster laughed. Some of them will hate that. The ones who hate it need it most. They shook hands on the deal. As Foster drove away, Sarah returned to her greenhouse. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Seedlings to transplant, systems to check, problems to solve. Her phone buzzed. A message from General Hartwell. Asterisk. Dr. Foster briefed me on his visit. His team starts training with you next month. I'm told they're terrified. Good. Thank you for teaching us that not everything important requires a computer. Asterisk. Sarah smiled and put her phone away. Then she turned off her tablet, ignored the automated alerts, and spent the next hour simply walking through her greenhouses. Watching, listening, feeling, understanding in the way that computers never could. Because some intelligence doesn't come from processing power. It comes from the wisdom to know when to trust the machine and when to trust yourself.